So today I want to talk a little bit about the process that I went through to pay off $174,000 worth of debt in 2.5 years. I'm going to kind of take my time a little bit. What I'm trying to do on this channel really is sort of slow the conversation down and not just, vomit a bunch of information on you guys, and really just kind of give you more insights as to how I've gotten to the place that I've gotten to, and share some of the pitfalls and some of the things. So I've got some notes here. Grab a beverage if you're so inclined. And I think it's really important also to mention that, as I'm recording this, the Bitcoin price has dropped to 95K as I have been checking the price this morning, which I know it can be very demoralizing. I think especially if you're newer to Bitcoin, or you've been in Bitcoin for a few years and you've expected, this number go up thing, or even for those of us that are, OG Bitcoiners that, sort of have plans for that. So I want to kind of wrap this conversation in kind of with the idea of kind of the mindset, really, because yes, there are a lot of strategic and tactical things that I'm going to share about the $174,000 I paid off in 2.5 years. But the whole pivotal thing is actually my mindset. So let me back up. Back in 2004, I woke up one day and found myself $174,000 in debt. Now, I think it's important also to unpack, all right, well, what was that debt? What was that debt made up of? The debt was made up of $43,000 of consumer debt that lived inside of a home equity line of credit. And the other $131,000 was a condo that I had purchased in downtown Atlanta. Now, that was the status, that was the state that I sort of woke up in. Also important to that part of my story is the fact that I was very much underemployed. I had left a career in Yellow Pages advertising sales about 2 years before this to pursue a career in music. And I was not financially prepared for it. The fact that I had purchased the condo, it was a really, really bad idea. And I was talked into it. I was kind of manipulated into it, or I allowed myself to be manipulated into it by my real estate agent. So it's all, sort of water under the bridge, and it all turned out the way that it should have, with much weeping and gnashing of teeth, I might add. But I think it's important to kind of offer a little bit more insight as to how I actually ended up, $174,000 in debt. So 1990, go back to 1997. I had just graduated from college, and I had just married a girl that I had been in an off and on relationship since high school. And we were, both finished college. She had finished college before I did. And long story short with that, and I can share more about that in a future video, but the long story short with that is that 6 months into our marriage, she left for another older, wealthier man who is actually one of my business mentors at the time. So it just sort of is meant to share and set the backdrop for just how devastated, I was. It caused me to move from where I lived and where we sort of started our lives together in the Southwest Florida area and relocate to the Atlanta area. And so the previous, 7 years, 97, 98, 99, 2000. Yeah, that was probably 7 years I was into it at that point. So I was in a healing process for sure, but I just made a lot of really bad decisions. And unfortunately, I had really pushed away from what I witnessed growing up. My mother was always very frugal, very conservative financially. There was a little bit of a kind of a negative bent in the way that she sort of deployed that in my view. And so I was very excited to get out of poverty, to get out of the very, very lower rungs of the middle class. And so when I got out of the Army and went to college, and particularly in my relationship with this person, started to really embody more of the middle class attitudes about money. And that was really what led me astray. So in that relationship, I came out of the Army with, back in those days, I had like $15,000 in cash sitting in my bank account. I had zero debt, and within a couple of years inside of that relationship, like, that was drained, because this person that I was in the relationship and ultimately wound up marrying had a completely different worldview. So while I was uncomfortable with that, I just sort of went along with it. So by 2004, recovering from a really, really awful, hurtful divorce, moving to a brand new city where I didn't know anybody, changing careers from a very, I know that at this point in time, Yellow Pages advertising is a thing of the past. That's like the stuff of dinosaurs. But back in those times, it was a very, very lucrative business. And it was very lucrative for me as a salesman. But when I moved from Southwest Florida to Atlanta, the company that I worked for was a subsidiary, the company that I worked for was actually the parent company of the company that I had worked for down in Florida. And the culture was completely different. I went from, this company in Florida where the culture of the company was very much family oriented. It was very much like they celebrated every win. I had tons of them. I broke a lot of sales records, in my first year and a half with them. And I came to Atlanta to this much more corporatized entity that was, the culture shock was so tremendous that I literally had a hard time getting out of bed every day, because it was just terrible. So all of that to say that, I had left a very lucrative career because, I was ready to jump ship and kind of start my life as a professional musician. And, it was going fairly well. I was starting to get, more gigs. I was starting to do, fairly well. But it wasn't good enough financially. And so I started to have to, the home equity line of credit that I had I actually started living off of that, which was a big, big, big problem. And so by 2004, I had basically utilized that line of credit all the way up to its limit, which was $43,000. So at that point, I woke up, I checked my bank account, I looked at, what I owed, and I basically just kind of freaked out. I just felt like, I felt hopeless. I felt, the prospects for, my whole mode of life at that point were not good. And so I've told this story many times, but I started listening to Dave Ramsey during that period. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was this idea of an emergency fund, and how he was saying, even back in those days, that, hey, look, if you don't have $10,000 saved as an emergency fund, you're wrong. Because, statistically, even back then, every 10 years you were going to have a $7,000 to $10,000 emergency. So that was a huge eye opener for me. And so I really corrected course. I went through his program. I went through Financial Peace University. I listened to the discs. I talked to several, mentors, and man, I really buckled down, and I really got serious about it. I went through the process of getting my finances organized, getting them into a zero-based budget. I began tracking every expense. It lit a fire under me to re-enter corporate sales, which, by the Lord's grace, I was able to get a job pretty quickly with a very well-known software company. And because of my motivation, I rose, to be the rookie of the year sales guy. The cool thing was that before side hustles were really a thing in terms of the language that we use, I was able to keep, because most of the music stuff that I was doing was in the evenings and on the weekends, I used my music connections and the gigs that I had and the gigs that were expanding. I used that as a side hustle. And I think that coupled with this sales job, really accelerated the process for me. And so it really, I think that unless and until that, and this is what I preach to my private clients all the time. I've been a financial coach now for 17 years. You really are never going to win with money unless you are organized, budgeting, tracking your expenses. Now, I went through Dave Ramsey's financial coaching program so that I could sort of become a certified coach with him. So that's a whole other story, and I'll get into that as well. But how this relates to just the overarching theme of getting to a place where, okay, this process is rather boring. And Bitcoin, or if you're, watching this and you're in the FIRE movement, or you're just trying to, wherever you are along that continuum, this idea of it getting boring is very, very important. So that's why when you're looking at just sort of the price fluctuations in Bitcoin or even gold or silver or what you have in the market, it's just really important to always have a solid plan in place. Now, can be very prescriptive about the ways that I lead my private clients through this, but what I try to do first is sit down and really get a strong, solid idea of where they are in their financial journey. So it's, okay, what's your income? What's your non-mortgage debt? What's your mortgage debt? What are your monthly expenses? And that part sometimes can take about 3 months for them to figure out because they're not tracking anything, they're not organized, and all of those things. But I will say that, as my wife and I have been in this posture for all of these years, we're starting to be a little bit more open to, especially when you look at taking out a Bitcoin-backed loan or Bitcoin mortgages. These are things that I'm looking into. Another thing that we've started doing as an experiment is, looking at products like BTCI, which is a covered call ETF, or STRC, which is a preferred stock from Strategy that pays right now pays like a 10.5% monthly dividend that is return of capital, so it's tax deferred. So we're looking at those things. So this has become another sort of leg in the stool for us in terms of, just trying to generate income from assets that we already have. So I don't have all this stuff figured out. I do have, the getting out of debt piece and getting, organized on a budget, tracking expenses figured out. So what we're trying to do right now is take what we have and really exponentiate that from our net worth to, in the next, 5 years, getting to, sort of the next level of that. And I'll be more specific with that, especially as you guys, kind of engage and want to know more about that. I'm specifically being a little bit nebulous about that right now. But yeah, I think no matter where you are on the journey, I wanted to share a little bit of my story a little bit more of my story so that hopefully there are some insights into that are helpful to you, because I think winning with money is kind of like warfare. That's kind of the way that I look at it, because even when you're out of debt and even when you're in a positive posture, case in point, the last 5 years of my corporate career, I wound up changing companies like 4 different times, but we significantly, increased our income in that last 5 years. And there's always a temptation, societal temptation, your social network temptation, and even your own personal temptations to have like lifestyle creep. And, during that last 5 years, my wife and I were very much a part of the FIRE movement. I was reading books like Jacob Lund Fisker's Early Retirement Extreme, and so we were living on 10 to 20% of our income and saving and investing the rest because I hated corporate America so much that I was like desperate to get out of it. So I don't want to keep rambling on about this. So I just want to know, from your perspective, like, where are you in this process? Are you at the beginning of it? Are you part of the FIRE movement? Are you a Bitcoiner? And hopefully these little talks, I'm calling them fireside Bitcoin conversations or chats. And I just want to help you guys develop that mindset of it's okay that this is boring. It's okay, especially once you get to a posture sort of like we are, where we're completely out of debt. We have no debt, but we're actually considering taking on some debt, perhaps. And we're just kind of being transparent about that journey that we're on. So if this is helpful to you, I would love it if you liked, subscribed, share the video with somebody that you know, and I'll see you in the next one.